Let me ask you something real. Have you ever made a mistake and felt like everything was falling apart? Maybe it was something small, like saying the wrong word in English and feeling embarrassed. Or maybe it was something bigger, like failing a test, missing an opportunity, or letting someone down. Whatever it was, it probably left a little voice in your head whispering, "See, you're not good enough." Well, let's stop right there, because today we're going to challenge that voice. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the English Talk Show. I'm Peter, your host, your partner, and maybe today, your reminder that you are more capable, more resilient, and more ready than you think. And if this is your first time here, let me say, you're not here by accident. You're here because there's something inside you, a fire, a desire, a quiet strength that wants to grow. Not just in English, but as a human being. This podcast is about listening. Yes, it's about practicing English in a calm, natural, and powerful way. But more than that, it's about transformation. Here, we talk about real things. We talk about fear, self-doubt, procrastination, confidence, action, dreams, failure, and how all of it plays a role in your journey. Not just as an English learner, but as someone trying to live a more meaningful life. So here's what I want you to do right now. Take a deep breath, put on your headphones, get comfortable. Maybe you're washing dishes, walking, driving, or just lying on the couch. Wherever you are, I want you to let this message sink into your mind. You don't need to understand every word. Just feel the meaning. Let your ears get used to the sound of English. This is your space. This is your moment. Now, let's talk about mistakes. Because here's the truth. Mistakes are not the opposite of success. They are the path to success. But most of us were never taught that. Most of us were taught to avoid mistakes at all costs, to be perfect, to get it right the first time, to hide our failures. And that mindset, it's poison. It kills growth, it paralyzes action, and it keeps you stuck, afraid to try, afraid to speak, afraid to be seen as someone who doesn't know it all. In today's episode, we're going to dive deep into this idea. We're going to look at mistakes from a completely different perspective. Because once you understand the truth about failure, everything changes. You'll stop feeling ashamed. You'll stop holding back. And most importantly, you'll start moving forward with more freedom, more courage, and more energy. This is not just motivation. This is reprogramming how you think. And by the end of this episode, you're going to see mistakes as gifts, as signs that you're learning, growing, and evolving. If you stay with me until the end, here's my promise. You will walk away not only feeling better about your past, but feeling excited about your future. So stick with me, my friend, because this journey we're about to take, it's one that could change the way you see yourself forever. Ready? Then let's begin.
Chapter 1. Why We Fear Mistakes. Understanding the emotional weight behind the fear of being wrong and why it's more common than you think. Let's be honest with ourselves. One of the biggest reasons we don't try new things, one of the main reasons we hold ourselves back is fear. Not fear of physical danger, but the quieter, deeper fear of being wrong, of messing up, of making a mistake and being seen, judged, or even worse, feeling like we failed ourselves. And this fear, it's not just something that lives in your mind, it lives in your body. It shapes how you breathe, how you speak, how you move through the world. It whispers things to you like, "You're not good enough," or "What if you embarrass yourself?" And sometimes it doesn't whisper at all. Sometimes it screams. Now here's the truth, and I need you to hear this. If you feel this fear, you are not alone. In fact, it's one of the most human emotions we share. Everyone, from the most successful entrepreneur to the quiet student sitting in the back of the classroom, has felt the sting of making a mistake and the shame that sometimes follows. Why? Because since childhood, most of us had been conditioned to believe that mistakes are bad, that they are something to avoid, something that defines our worth or our intelligence. We were taught that making a mistake in school meant a red mark on the paper, a low grade, a disappointed look, or worse, the feeling that maybe we're just not smart enough. Over time, that belief sinks in, not just in school, but in life. We start to believe that being wrong makes us less capable, less valuable, less worthy of praise or progress. And so, we begin to avoid situations where mistakes might happen. We stay quiet, we stay still, we stop raising our hands, we stop starting new things. But let's step back and look at this with a fresh perspective. Where did this belief come from? And is it really true? Does a mistake really mean you're failing? Or could it mean that you're growing? You see, the fear of being wrong often comes from a deep desire to be accepted, to belong, to feel safe. We want to get things right because we want to be seen as competent. We want to feel proud of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's part of being human. But the problem begins when we let that fear stop us from trying at all. When the possibility of making a mistake becomes so terrifying that we would rather stay in the comfort zone, doing nothing, than risk stepping outside and learning something new. And here's something important to remember. The comfort zone might feel safe, but it's not where growth happens. In fact, it's often the place where dreams quietly die. The more we avoid mistakes, the smaller our world becomes. The fewer chances we take, the fewer new experiences we allow ourselves to have, the less we grow, the less we live.
Now, I want to talk to you directly, not as a podcast host, but as a fellow traveler on this journey. I know what it feels like to be afraid of failing. I've held myself back too. I've avoided new projects, conversations, even relationships, all because I was afraid of getting it wrong. I know how heavy that fear can be, and I know how real it feels. But I also know this. Every meaningful thing I've ever learned in life came after a mistake, not before. Every success I've experienced was built on a foundation of trial, error, and more trial. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it changed me. And that's why I'm here with you now, because I want you to start seeing mistakes not as a sign of weakness, but as a sign of courage, as proof that you're trying, as evidence that you're stepping into something new and unfamiliar, and that takes bravery. When you're learning a language, for example, like English,
You will make mistakes. You will mispronounce things. You will forget words. You will use the wrong tense. And guess what? That's amazing. That means you're doing it. That means you're in motion. And most importantly, that means you're learning. Because no matter how many books you read or lessons you study, real learning only happens when you start using the language, when you speak, write, listen, and, yes, make mistakes. Think of a child learning to walk. When a toddler takes their first steps and falls, no one says, "Well, clearly walking isn't for you." No, we cheer, we smile, we say, "Look, they're trying, they're learning." We celebrate the fall because it means progress. Why then do we stop celebrating our mistakes as we grow older? Why do we treat every error as a failure instead of a step forward? Hey, if you're still here, it shows you truly care about learning and improving your English through listening. So please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. It shows you value our work, and it gives us the motivation to keep creating more for you. Here's the truth that most people forget. Mistakes are not the opposite of success. They are the path to success. Every person you admire, every artist, athlete, teacher, or leader has made more mistakes than you can imagine. And do you know the only difference between them and someone who never reaches their potential? They didn't stop. They didn't let their mistakes define them. They kept going, they learned, they adapted, and eventually they arrived. So if you're holding back because you're afraid of looking foolish, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of being judged, let me say this clearly. The people who matter don't care if you make mistakes, and the people who care don't matter. What matters is that you're growing. What matters is that you're learning. What matters is that you're brave enough to try. Let this chapter be a turning point. Let this be the moment you give yourself permission to be imperfect. Let this be the moment you stop fearing mistakes and start embracing them. Because your mistakes are not a reflection of your failure. They are a reflection of your effort. And effort is always something to be proud of.
Chapter 2. Redefining what a mistake really is. Let me ask you something personal. When you hear the word mistake, what's the first image that comes to your mind? Is it something embarrassing? Something painful? Maybe a memory that still makes you cringe when you think about it? If you're like most people, the word mistake triggers a negative emotional reaction. Shame, regret, maybe even a sense of failure. That's completely normal. From a young age, we're taught to avoid mistakes at all costs. In school, getting the wrong answer meant a red mark on your paper. At work, a mistake might mean a loss of trust or even consequences. In relationships, making a mistake can hurt someone you care about deeply. So it's no wonder we've come to associate mistakes with something dangerous, something to fear, something to run from. But let's take a moment to challenge that idea. What if a mistake isn't what we've been told it is? What if the entire concept of a mistake is misunderstood? Let's imagine for a second that every mistake you've made wasn't a step back, but a step forward. That every wrong turn you took wasn't a detour, but part of the path. That every awkward moment, every failed attempt, every mispronounced word, every forgotten line was not a sign of failure, but a sign of movement, a sign of growth, a sign that you were trying. See,
The problem isn't the mistake itself. The problem is how we define it. We define mistakes as evidence that we're not good enough, that we're not ready, that we're somehow broken or incapable. But that's not what a mistake is. A mistake is simply feedback, a signal. It's the world's way of showing you, hey, this didn't work. Try a different way. That's it. Nothing more. Nothing personal. Just information. Think about how babies learn to walk. They fall. A lot. But we never look at a baby who's fallen down and say, wow, she really failed. Walking just isn't for her. No, we cheer them on. We say, good job, try again. Because we understand that falling is part of walking. It's the process. And yet, somewhere along the way, as we grow older, we forget this truth. We start to think we're supposed to be perfect on the first try. That trying and failing makes us foolish. That making mistakes means we're not cut out for success. But that's a lie. And that lie has held too many people back for too long. So let's redefine it right here, right now. A mistake is not a failure. A mistake is not a reflection of your worth. A mistake is not the end of your journey. It's part of it. It's a teacher, a guide, a compass pointing you toward your next lesson. When you shift the way you see mistakes, you take back your power. You stop fearing them. You stop avoiding them. And instead, you start learning from them. You start using them. You start growing through them. And here's the most powerful part. The people who succeed in life, truly succeed, are not the ones who avoid mistakes. They are the ones who embrace them, who study them, who fall and get up and fall again and keep moving. They know something most people don't, that the path to success is not a straight line. It's full of bumps and bruises and wrong turns. But each of those wrong turns teaches you how to find the right one. Every misstep is one step closer to mastery. In the world of language learning, especially English, this is so important. You cannot learn a language without making mistakes. It's impossible. Mistakes are your proof that you're using the language, that you're testing it, exploring it, practicing it in real time. If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing yourself. You're staying in the safe zone, and no one grows in the safe zone. So from now on, I want you to change the way you speak to yourself when you make a mistake. Instead of saying, I'm so stupid, say, that was a useful lesson. Instead of saying, I'll never get this right, say, I'm learning something new every time I try. Instead of saying, I'm messed up again, say, I'm improving through every attempt. Words matter. The way you talk to yourself matters, because your mindset shapes your reality. Mistakes are not evidence of failure. They are the bricks that build your foundation. Each one strengthens you if you allow it to, if you listen to it, if you keep moving. So the next time you feel the sting of getting something wrong, pause, breathe, and say to yourself, this is part of it. This is helping me. Because it is. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep going. And if you keep going, those mistakes you once feared, one day they'll be the very stories you tell when you explain how far you've come. Chapter 3. Mistakes as Evidence of Effort. Let's take a moment to flip the script. We live in a world that glorifies results, final scores, perfect grades, finished projects, success stories. And in the middle of all that, we forget something important. None of those outcomes would exist without the messy, uncertain, and sometimes frustrating process that came before them. And what lives at the heart of that process? Mistakes. Mistakes are not signs of weakness or failure. They are signs that you are trying. They are proof that you're in motion, and that motion matters more than perfection. Let's say you're learning English. You finally get the courage to speak in class, in a meeting, or maybe even in a conversation with a native speaker. You say something and you know it doesn't come out quite right. Maybe your grammar slips. Maybe you forget a word and have to pause awkwardly. Maybe someone even corrects you. And you walk away thinking, ugh, I messed up. But pause right there. Ask yourself, did I stay silent or did I try? Because if you tried, you didn't fail. You made a step forward. And that effort matters a lot more than we often give ourselves credit for. Think of it this way. Every mistake you make is a footprint, a marker on the path that shows you're moving, experimenting, reaching, stretching beyond your comfort zone. If you're not making mistakes, it's usually because you're not doing much. You're sitting still, watching, waiting, observing. And while there's a time for that, progress doesn't happen there. Progress happens when you risk looking silly, when you attempt something you're not sure you can do, when you try, fall, get up, and try again. The truth is, learning anything new, especially a skill as complex and personal as speaking another language, demands that you make errors. There is no shortcut, no perfect road that lets you skip the uncomfortable parts. Fluency is built on 1,000 tiny mistakes, mispronounced words, confused tenses, awkward pauses, sentences that don't land. All of that is part of it. All of that is effort, and effort is the engine behind all learning. Let's take a real-life example. Think about athletes, world-class runners, swimmers, gymnasts. What separates them from the rest isn't just talent. It's discipline, it's repetition, it's thousands of hours of imperfect practice, and yes, it's countless mistakes, falling off the beam, losing balance, missing the goal. But those mistakes don't stop them. In fact, those mistakes are why they improve. Every time something goes wrong, they make adjustments. They fine-tune, they grow, and slowly, consistently, they turn effort into excellence.
You're doing the same thing when you practice your English or any new skill. Every time you say a word wrong, your brain notices. It files that experience away. It compares it to the correct form. And the next time, you'll be just a little closer. The feedback loop is invisible, but it's always working. Your mistakes are literally shaping your growth if you let them. But here's the problem. Most people quit too soon. They make a few mistakes, feel embarrassed or discouraged, and decide, this isn't for me. They let the discomfort stop them instead of letting it guide them. But if they could just keep going a little longer, they'd see that the very thing they fear, messing up, is actually what helps them move forward. So I want you to look at mistakes differently from now on. When you catch yourself thinking, I can't believe I said that wrong, change it to, I'm proud of myself for speaking at all. When you write something and later realize it had errors, don't erase the whole thing. Look at it as a learning tool. What can you take from it? What will you remember next time? There's so much strength in effort, so much value in showing up and trying, even when you're unsure. Every mistake is a scar of effort, a sign that you care enough to take a risk, that you're not frozen by fear,
that you're committed to learning, even when it's hard, even when it's slow, even when no one sees how much you're working behind the scenes. You don't need to be flawless to grow. You just need to stay in motion. Keep practicing, keep stumbling, keep learning. The more mistakes you make, the more progress you create, because each one brings you one step closer to clarity, confidence, and competence. Remember this: the goal isn't perfection. The goal is movement. And mistakes are the evidence that you are moving forward. So the next time you catch yourself in the middle of a mistake, smile. Really? Because that moment means you're doing the work, you're showing up, you're living in the process. And that's what truly matters. If you're still here, it shows you truly care about learning and improving your English through listening. So please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. It shows you value our work, and it gives us the motivation to keep creating more for you. Chapter 4: What Native Speakers Don't Tell You. Revealing the hidden truth. Native speakers also make mistakes. Constantly. There's a secret in the world of language learning. A quiet truth that no textbook will tell you, and that most fluent speakers don't even realize themselves, or if they do, they rarely say it out loud. Here it is. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. Yes, constantly. Every single day. In every conversation. And yet, we never call it bad English. We never think they're failing at their own language. Why? Because we accept it as natural. We see it as part of how real communication works. But when it comes to learners, especially those trying hard to get everything right, we hold ourselves to a much higher standard, a harsher, more unrealistic one. And that has to change. Let's be honest. If you've ever felt frustrated with yourself for forgetting a word, using the wrong tense, or mispronouncing something, you're not alone. But take a moment to really think about what native English speakers sound like in everyday life. Not in movies, not in grammar books, in real life. You'll hear sentences that trail off halfway. Words like or used every 3 seconds. Slang that breaks every grammar rule you've ever studied. Incomplete phrases, repetitions, and yes, even mistakes. Misused words, bad subject-verb agreement, incorrect plurals. Native speakers are not grammar machines. They are human, and humans are messy when they speak. You see, the difference is not in who makes mistakes, but in how those mistakes are perceived. When a native speaker says, "There's lots of cars outside," no one corrects them. But if an English learner says the same thing, they might feel embarrassed or even judged. But both sentences are grammatically off. And still, communication happens. The meaning is clear. That's what matters most. Even professional speakers, news anchors, teachers, radio hosts occasionally trip over their words, start a sentence and change direction halfway through, or mispronounce something on air. And yet, we don't call them failures. We call them fluent. Because fluency isn't about perfection. It's about flow, confidence, rhythm, and the ability to recover from little slips without losing your message.
This is something every learner needs to hear. Native speakers are not perfect, and you don't need to be either. You don't have to master every rule before you speak. You don't need to memorize every irregular verb before writing a sentence.
You just need to keep communicating with courage and curiosity and allow yourself the freedom to speak imperfectly. In fact, if you listen closely, you'll notice something powerful. Native speakers often don't follow the very grammar rules that language learners study so hard. They drop words. They use gonna instead of going to, wanna instead of want to, ain't instead of isn't. They mix verb tenses. They end sentences with prepositions. And still, they communicate just fine. That's because language isn't a math equation. It's a living, breathing system designed for one thing: connection. And if you can make someone understand you, then you're already succeeding, even if it's not perfect. There's something freeing about accepting this. When you realize that even the people you're trying to sound like are constantly breaking the rules, it gives you permission to be human too. It softens the pressure. It reminds you that language is not about proving how smart you are. It's about expressing your thoughts, your needs, your emotions. And that's something that everyone, regardless of accent or vocabulary size, deserves to do. Of course, we want to keep improving. We want to sound natural, polished, and confident. But let that be a journey, not a requirement before you speak. Perfection can come later, slowly, with practice. But don't wait for it to begin. Because the truth is, you're already closer than you think. You probably understand more than you give yourself credit for. You've already made more progress than your inner critic allows you to see. And if native speakers can live their whole lives making little language mistakes without shame, then so can you, while growing every day. So the next time you hesitate to speak because you're afraid of making a mistake, remember this truth. Even the people you're trying to impress make mistakes too, constantly. The difference is they've learned not to fear them, and you can too. Language is not a test. It's not a race. It's a bridge, a tool, a friend. Use it imperfectly. Use it bravely. Because you, not your grammar score, are the most important part of your English journey. Chapter 5. From Perfectionism to Progress. Escaping the trap of perfectionism and learning to fall in love with the process. Perfectionism is a silent killer of dreams. It disguises itself as high standards, as ambition, as the desire to do things right. But behind that polished mask, perfectionism often hides fear, the fear of failure, of judgment, of not being enough. And when you're learning something as personal and exposed as a new language, that fear can be paralyzing. You hesitate before speaking. You obsess over grammar. You avoid situations where you might be put on the spot. You tell yourself, "I'm not ready yet." And days, months, even years go by, waiting for the moment when you'll feel flawless enough to begin. But here's the hard truth. That moment never comes. Perfectionism creates an illusion. The idea that one day, with enough effort and practice, you'll reach a level where you'll speak English without making a single mistake, where you'll always choose the right word, where your pronunciation will be crystal clear and your confidence unshakable. But that level doesn't exist, not even for native speakers. What does exist is progress, small, messy, beautiful progress. The kind that only happens when you stop trying to impress and start trying to connect. The greatest lie perfectionism tells is that you're not allowed to fail, that every slip is a sign of weakness, that if you don't get it right the first time, you're doing something wrong. But language doesn't work like that. In fact, learning depends on failure. It's in those forgotten words, those awkward pauses, those moments when you get stuck, that real learning takes place. Because when you make a mistake, your brain pays attention. It adjusts. It strengthens the memory. That's not failure. That's growth in motion. When you let go of perfectionism, something amazing happens. You begin to speak more. You take more chances. You laugh at your errors instead of hiding from them. And slowly, your fear shrinks. Your confidence grows. You stop aiming to sound like a native speaker and start sounding like yourself, a version of you who is curious, resilient, and deeply committed to growth. That shift is powerful because the goal isn't to be flawless. The goal is to be free.
You have to give yourself permission to be a beginner, to stumble, to sound strange, to learn out loud. Think of a child learning to walk. They fall down constantly, but they keep going. They don't wait to walk perfectly before trying. They walk because they fall. And eventually, they run. That's exactly how language learning works. You must learn to fall in love with the process, not the illusion of perfection at the end of it. And here's the truth that many learners don't hear enough. Your imperfections make you relatable. They open the door for human connection. When you speak English and make a little mistake, most people don't judge you. They admire your effort. They recognize your courage. And often, they respond with kindness, encouragement, and respect, because they know what it takes to express yourself in a second language. Your bravery inspires others, and that's something perfect grammar never will. So instead of chasing the impossible dream of perfection, focus on being consistent. Speak a little every day. Listen, read, write. Make English a part of your daily rhythm, not just your study sessions. Build habits, not pressure. Aim for progress, not performance. And trust that with time, your fluency will grow, not in silence, but in action. There's something beautiful about a learner who shows up, imperfect but determined. Someone who keeps going even when it's hard. That's where transformation happens. Not in waiting, not in planning, not in endlessly reviewing vocabulary lists, but in living the language, making it part of your voice, your thoughts, your daily experiences. That's how fluency is born. So today, make a choice. Let go of perfectionism. Step into progress. Speak with mistakes. Celebrate your small wins. Embrace the process. Because the road to fluency is not a straight, perfect line. It's a winding, imperfect, glorious journey. And you, exactly as you are right now, are already on it.
Chapter 6. The Science of Making Mistakes. What neuroscience tells us about error-based learning and memory. Let's step away for a moment from motivation and mindset and enter the world of science, the world of brains, neurons, and the fascinating mechanics of how we learn. Because here's something that might surprise you. Neuroscience loves mistakes. In fact, your brain is designed to use them. It turns out that every time you make a mistake, in language, in judgment, in action, your brain lights up. It responds with curiosity. It marks the moment as significant. And it begins to build stronger neural pathways so that next time you do better. Mistakes, quite literally, make your brain grow. There's a phenomenon in neuroscience known as the error-related negativity. It's a measurable brainwave that occurs within milliseconds of making a mistake. It doesn't wait for someone to point it out. Your brain catches it immediately. And the moment that happens, your brain begins adjusting, recalibrating, learning. This internal feedback loop, known as error-based learning, is not just real, it's essential. Without it, your progress would stall. Mistakes aren't signs of failure, they're signals. They tell your brain where to focus, what to correct, and how to improve. This is especially true in language learning. The human brain is a prediction machine. When you try to speak English, your brain is constantly predicting which word comes next, how it should sound, what grammar pattern fits best. When your prediction is wrong, let's say you use the wrong verb tense or pronounce a word awkwardly, your brain notices the gap between expectation and reality. That gap is what drives learning. It's not just repetition that makes learning stick. It's the moment of surprise, of challenge, of slight discomfort. That's when your memory gets sharper. That's when the learning becomes durable. Studies in cognitive science have shown that when learners expect to be corrected and are open to feedback, they retain information far more effectively than those who avoid errors or fear being wrong. Why? Because correction triggers focus. It wakes the brain up. But even more fascinating, it's not the correction itself that does the magic. It's the mistake that comes before it. That's the key moment. Without the initial misstep, there's no spark to ignite deeper learning.
And here's something even more powerful. The emotional response to a mistake, the embarrassment, the frustration, the momentary discomfort, can actually enhance memory if it's processed correctly. When you experience an emotional reaction to a mistake and then correct it, your brain is more likely to encode that moment into long-term memory. It's not about shame, it's about salience. The mistake becomes a learning event, a landmark in your journey, a memory your brain chooses to keep. Now, of course, there's a balance. If mistakes are met with harsh criticism or constant pressure, the brain goes into a defensive mode. Stress hormones flood the system, and learning shuts down. But if mistakes are met with curiosity, with reflection, with encouragement, the opposite happens. Neuroplasticity increases. The brain becomes more adaptable. It builds resilience. In other words, the environment in which you make mistakes matters. Safe, supportive environments allow mistakes to become tools. Hostile ones turn them into walls. And hey, if you're still here, it shows you truly care about learning and improving your English through listening. So please, take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. It shows you value our work, and it gives us the motivation to keep creating more for you. So, what does all this mean for you, as someone learning English, or anything, really? It means that each time you make a mistake, you're doing the most important thing a learner can do. You're creating an opportunity for your brain to rewire itself. That slip of grammar? That moment when you confused much with many. That time when you forgot how to say something and stumbled through with gestures and guesses. Those aren't failures. They're golden moments of growth. Your brain is learning deeply, actively, and biologically. You don't need to avoid mistakes. You need to chase them, not carelessly, but intentionally. Speak even when you're unsure. Write even when it feels clumsy. Ask questions. Try new phrases. Play with the language. Each time you do, your brain will reward you. It will adjust, adapt, remember. Progress isn't always visible on the surface, but under the hood, your brain is changing with every brave attempt you make. One more thing. People often ask, how do I become fluent faster? And the answer, supported by neuroscience, is this: make more mistakes. The people who improve the fastest are not the ones who get everything right. They're the ones who try more, risk more, speak more, and yes, fail more. Because the brain thrives on friction. It needs challenges. It needs correction. It needs movement. And mistakes are the fuel that keeps that engine running. So, next time you make a mistake, pause. Don't shame yourself. Smile. Because in that moment, messy, imperfect, human, you're doing the exact thing your brain was built to do. You're learning.
Chapter 7. Speaking without shame. How to open your mouth with confidence, even when you're unsure. There is a silent weight that many language learners carry, a weight that doesn't show up in textbooks or vocabulary lists. It's not about grammar or pronunciation. It's something deeper, something emotional. Shame. The fear of sounding foolish, the fear of making mistakes in front of others, the fear that your accent will be judged, your words misunderstood, your intelligence questioned. And so, instead of speaking, many learners stay silent. They wait until they feel ready, until their English is perfect. But that moment never comes. Because shame doesn't disappear when your language improves. It disappears when you decide to speak anyway. Shame is not a language problem. It's a human problem. And it shows up most powerfully when we try to express ourselves in a language that is not our own. Suddenly, we feel small. We compare ourselves to native speakers. We judge our own voice. We hesitate, overthink, hold back. The words are in our minds, but our mouths stay closed. This inner silence can be louder than any mispronounced word. It's the silence of doubt, of fear, of holding ourselves hostage to an impossible standard. But here's the truth. Confidence does not come after perfection. Confidence comes from action. It is built, brick by brick, each time you speak, especially when you feel unsure. The most confident speakers aren't necessarily the most fluent. They're the most willing. Willing to speak with mistakes. Willing to be misunderstood. Willing to keep going, even when it's awkward. That willingness is courage, and courage is what breaks the cycle of shame. Think of a child learning to speak. They don't worry about grammar rules or sentence structure. They just talk. They use gestures, facial expressions, invented words. And we as adults cheer them on. We celebrate every small sentence, every messy attempt. But when we are the ones learning, we rarely give ourselves that same kindness. We expect to speak like professionals. We forget that mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are evidence that we are learning something new. To speak without shame, you must first stop seeing mistakes as enemies. Instead, see them as part of your voice. See them as steps, not stumbles. Yes, you may pronounce something incorrectly. Yes, you may forget a word mid-sentence. But the moment you try, you're already succeeding. Because language is not a performance. It's a tool for connection, expression, understanding. And imperfect tools still work.
It helps to remember, most people are not judging you. Native speakers are often impressed by anyone who tries to speak their language. Your effort is seen, your bravery is noticed. And those who mock or criticize, they're not your audience. They don't deserve to be the reason you stay silent. Let their opinions fall away. Speak for you. Speak because you have something to say. Speak because you've waited long enough to let your thoughts be heard. You don't need to wait until your English is good enough to speak. That mindset keeps your progress trapped. The more you speak, the better your English becomes. And the better your English becomes, the more your confidence grows. It's a cycle, but it begins with the first step. Not the perfect step, just any step. Even a small one, even if your hands shake and your heart races. Open your mouth anyway. Let the words come out, broken, brave, and beautifully human. And when you do speak, don't apologize for your accent. Your accent is a reflection of your journey. It's a reminder that you are multilingual, that you have lived in more than one world, that your mind holds more than one voice. That is not something to hide. It's something to be proud of. Your accent is not a flaw. It is your signature. If you struggle to find your voice, start small. Speak to yourself in the mirror. Repeat phrases while walking. Narrate your day in English, out loud. Talk to a pet. Leave voice messages to friends. Find low-pressure spaces to build your comfort. Each time you hear yourself speak, you normalize the sound of your own voice in English. It becomes less foreign, less scary, more you. And when you're ready, speak in front of others. Order coffee in English. Ask questions in class. Join a conversation group. And when you get stuck, because you will, smile. Take a breath. Try again. No shame, no apologies, just progress. You have a voice. You always have. It may be uncertain, it may be quiet, but it is yours. And every time you use it, you rewrite the story of what's possible. Shame has no place in that story. Only courage, only growth, only the deep, beautiful truth that you are enough. Not when you're perfect, but exactly as you are. So go ahead, speak, not because you're sure, but because you're free.
Chapter 8. Learning to laugh at your errors. The power of humor and humility when learning a new language. Every language learner has a moment they'll never forget. A moment when they said something completely wrong and maybe even a little embarrassing. A word misused,
A sentence that sounded right in your mind but left your listener confused, amused, or even shocked. And in that moment, you might have felt your face turn red. Maybe you wanted the ground to swallow you whole. But later, hours or days later, that same moment becomes a story. And that story makes you laugh. That story, oddly enough, becomes one of your most cherished memories. Because in that mistake, you were alive. You were learning. You were human. Laughter is one of the most underrated tools in language learning. We often chase perfection, thinking that progress is a straight line and mistakes are something to avoid at all costs. But in truth, mistakes are what make the learning journey memorable. They add flavor. They break the ice. They remind us and those around us that language isn't just a system of rules, it's a playground. And sometimes you trip while running. Sometimes you fall. And when you do, if you can learn to laugh, not mockingly, but kindly, you turn failure into connection. Laughter at its best creates a bridge between people. It softens the tension. When you laugh at your own language blunders, you give others permission to relax too. You show them that communication is more important than correctness. You show them that you're not here to impress, you're here to connect. You're here to try, to grow, to be real. And that realness is far more powerful than any perfectly memorized phrase. Let's be honest, learning a new language will put you in awkward situations. You will say the wrong word. You will forget names. You will pronounce something in a way that makes someone giggle. You will ask where the bathroom is and accidentally say potato. These things will happen. And they are not signs that you're bad at languages. They are signs that you're doing the work, that you're putting yourself out there, that you're engaging with the world in a new way. And the only way to survive and thrive in these moments is to develop a sense of humor. But this kind of humor isn't about making fun of yourself in a cruel way. It's about humility. It's about accepting that you're a beginner, and that being a beginner is not something to be ashamed of. In fact, it's a stage filled with freedom. You get to experiment. You get to be silly. You get to drop the pressure of getting it right, and instead focus on getting involved. That mindset shift is what transforms learning from a stressful task into a joyful adventure. Humility opens doors. When you admit, oops, that didn't come out right, or you laugh and say, well, that's one way to say it, you're practicing something deeper than vocabulary. You're practicing resilience. You're showing up with courage even after messing up. And each time you bounce back with a smile instead of shame, you train your brain to enjoy the process instead of fearing it. In many cultures, humor is a shortcut to friendship. And when you're learning a new language, it can be your greatest ally. People tend to respond with warmth when they see you laugh at your mistakes rather than freeze in embarrassment. They want to help. They cheer you on. They share their own stories, their own errors. Suddenly, you're not just learning a language, you're building relationships. Let yourself be a little ridiculous. Be the student who tries, who flops, who tries again and laughs along the way. There is power in taking yourself lightly. It doesn't mean you're not serious about learning. It means you understand that lightness and laughter make the journey sustainable. Nobody wants to keep going if every step feels like a test they must pass. But everyone can keep going when the journey feels like a story they get to live, with all its twists, turns, and hilarious moments. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop fearing mistakes, you make fewer of them. When you laugh instead of panic, your brain stays open. You remember more. You learn faster. Stress blocks memory. Joy activates it. So the next time you say something odd, or forget a basic word, or use a phrase completely out of context, pause, smile, laugh if you can, and say to yourself, well, now I'll never forget that one. Your errors are not the opposite of progress. They are the path to it. And the stories you collect along the way, the funny, embarrassing, totally human ones, will one day be the stories you tell others who are just beginning. You'll say, "Oh, I remember when I said this instead of that, and everyone laughed, including me." And in that moment, you'll realize that those errors didn't hold you back. They moved you forward. So laugh, be bold, be human. Your language journey is not a test. It's a messy, beautiful dance. And sometimes the best way to learn is to laugh at your missteps, get back up, and keep dancing. Chapter 9. Every mistake has a lesson inside. How to extract practical wisdom from each misstep you make. At some point in your learning journey, you'll face a tough question. How do I keep going when I keep getting it wrong? When you've studied the vocabulary, practiced the grammar, rehearsed the pronunciation, and still make mistakes. When your efforts feel unnoticed, when the progress feels invisible, and when you begin to wonder if all those little errors mean you're not meant for this path. But here's the truth you must hold close. Every mistake you make is packed with hidden wisdom. It's not just an obstacle. It's a message, a signal, a lesson waiting to be discovered. We often think of mistakes as signs of failure. But that idea is not only false, it's harmful. Mistakes are not a sign that you're incapable. They are proof that you're trying, that you're in motion, that you're pushing beyond your comfort zone. And growth never happens inside comfort zones. Growth lives in the struggle. It hides in the moments that feel messy, frustrating, and unclear. If you learn to look beneath your mistakes, to ask why they happened, what they're showing you, and how you can respond differently, you turn each misstep into a powerful learning tool. Let's say you're speaking with someone in English, and you confuse two similar-sounding words, like kitchen and chicken. The other person pauses, smiles, and gently corrects you. You laugh, a little embarrassed, and move on. That moment could easily be dismissed as just another awkward language blunder. But it's more than that. It's a chance to pay attention. Why did you confuse those words? Was it pronunciation? Context? A gap in your listening skills? That one mistake, if you stop and reflect, might teach you more about English than an entire hour of passive studying. It shows you where your attention needs to go. It gives you something specific to work on. It reveals the gap, and once you see the gap, you can close it. Mistakes shine a light on the areas we don't yet fully understand. They're not there to shame us, they're there to guide us. The problem is not the mistake itself, it's the way we react to the mistake. If we ignore it, we miss the lesson. If we dwell on it with guilt or self-doubt, we turn learning into a punishment. But if we approach our mistakes with curiosity, if we ask ourselves, what is this trying to teach me? Then we shift from being passive learners to active ones. That's when real progress begins.
Think of your mistakes like feedback, not a final judgment, but a whisper saying, here's where you can improve. And the more you welcome this kind of feedback, the stronger and more independent you become. You start to develop a sharp ear for patterns. You notice how certain errors keep popping up. Maybe you always forget to use the past tense, or you struggle with articles, a versus the. Or maybe you translate directly from your native language and it sounds unnatural. These are not random failures, they are patterns, and patterns point to what you need to focus on next. There's also something very human and very beautiful about learning through mistakes. Because mistakes mean you're learning in real time, not just inside your head. You're not just memorizing rules, you're applying them, testing them, living them. And of course, living something always involves error. You don't ride a bike without falling. You don't learn to swim without swallowing water. You don't master a language without tripping over your own sentences. The only difference between someone who becomes fluent and someone who gives up is this. The fluent learner keeps showing up after the mistake. They listen, they adjust, they try again and again. The emotional part matters too. Mistakes can hurt. They can bruise your ego. They can make you feel slow or foolish. And it's okay to feel that sting. But don't let it stop you. Let it sharpen you. Let it remind you that you're not chasing perfection. You're chasing progress. And progress always asks for vulnerability. It asks you to admit, I don't know this yet. That little word, yet, is powerful. It turns every mistake into an invitation. It means the door is still open. The road is still waiting. You're still becoming the version of yourself who will get it right. Some of the best teachers in life are not people. They're mistakes. They teach you how to pause, how to reflect, how to be patient. They teach you humility. They build resilience. And when you learn to listen to them instead of running from them, you start to feel something shift. You begin to trust the process. You understand that there is no shortcut, no magic trick, just small daily efforts, honest reflection, and a willingness to fall forward. So the next time you mess up, in a conversation, a writing task, a test, don't ask, why do I always get this wrong? Ask, what can I take from this moment? Turn the spotlight from frustration to curiosity. Write the mistake down. Think about the context. Find a clearer example. Practice the correction. And most importantly, don't stop. Don't stop just because the road feels bumpy. That bump is part of the map. That bump is the signpost that says, keep going. This is the way. Because in the end, language learning is not about being flawless. It's about becoming fluent, not just in grammar, but in adaptability, in confidence, in the ability to fall and rise again. And that ability, that strength, is something you earn one mistake at a time.
Chapter 10. When you feel stuck or embarrassed. Emotional tools for moving forward when your confidence takes a hit. There's a moment that comes for every learner, whether it's your first week or your 5th year, when you hit a wall. Maybe you were in the middle of a conversation and forgot a simple word. Maybe you mispronounced something, and the person on the other side gave you a confused look. Or maybe, worse, they laughed, not out of cruelty, but because it sounded funny, and you laughed too. But deep down, it stung. These moments feel small from the outside, but inside, they can shake your confidence to the core. You start to question everything. Am I really capable of learning this? Why do I keep messing up? Maybe I'm just not good at languages. And suddenly, all the motivation you had, all the excitement from your last success, feels like it's slipping through your fingers. You feel stuck, ashamed, embarrassed, and alone. But here's the truth that rarely gets spoken out loud. These emotional dips are not signs that you're failing. They are signs that you're evolving. Growth is not linear. Confidence doesn't climb in a straight line. There will be days when you feel like a star, fluent, focused, flowing with words. And there will be days when you stumble on your own name. Both are part of the same journey. Feeling stuck or embarrassed is not a detour from progress. It is part of the path. It means you're pushing beyond your comfort zone. And every time you do that, you stretch, you grow, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. One of the most powerful tools you can develop as a learner and as a human being is emotional resilience. That doesn't mean pretending you're fine when you're not. It doesn't mean brushing off every mistake with fake positivity. It means learning how to sit with the discomfort without letting it define you. It means recognizing that the feeling of embarrassment is just a temporary visitor. It's a wave. And like every wave, it will pass if you don't resist it, if you breathe through it, if you let it move through you rather than trying to hide or escape it. The more you allow yourself to feel these moments, the quicker you'll come back stronger. Here's something else to remember. The people around you, whether they're classmates, teachers, native speakers, or strangers on the internet, they're not judging you as harshly as you think. In fact, most people admire those who are brave enough to try. The person who makes a mistake while speaking another language is doing something extraordinary. They are showing vulnerability. They are embracing discomfort. They are putting themselves in a position to grow. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to celebrate.
But I get it. Sometimes logic isn't enough to quiet that inner voice. So let's talk about emotional tools. Real, practical things you can do when you feel stuck or embarrassed. First, pause and breathe. Literally, stop what you're doing and take 3 slow, deep breaths. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of you that calms anxiety and restores clarity. It sounds simple, but it works. Second, name what you're feeling. Say to yourself, I feel embarrassed, or I feel frustrated. When you name an emotion, you create distance from it. You remind yourself that you are experiencing a feeling. You are not defined by it. Next, rewrite the story in your mind. Instead of saying, I messed up because I'm not good at this, say, I made a mistake because I'm learning. And that's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Changing the narrative changes your emotional response. It takes practice, yes, but over time you'll find that the voice in your head becomes more compassionate, more patient, more on your side. Another powerful tool? Talk to someone about it. Not someone who will minimize your feelings, but someone who understands. Maybe a fellow learner. Maybe a friend who has learned another language. Maybe a teacher who knows the struggle.
When we keep embarrassment locked inside, it grows. But when we speak it aloud, it loses its power. It becomes just another human moment, one we all share. And here's a beautiful truth. Some of the strongest breakthroughs happen right after you feel like giving up. That moment when you're sitting in frustration, wondering if it's all worth it, that's the edge of a transformation. If you stay with it, if you walk through it, you'll often come out clearer, braver, and more committed than ever before. This is the emotional turning point in the journey of language learning. It's not about avoiding embarrassment. It's about learning how to walk with it, to speak even when your voice shakes, to show up again and again, not because it's easy, but because it matters. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are growing. And growth always feels awkward. Think about a child learning to walk. They fall more times than they stand. But we don't shame them. We cheer for them. Why? Because we know it's part of the process. You deserve that same grace, that same encouragement, that same patience. So give it to yourself. In the next chapter, we'll explore why your progress sometimes feels slow and why that feeling is often a sign that you're actually right on track. But for now, remember this. If you feel stuck, embarrassed, or frustrated, congratulations. That means you're trying. That means you care. And that in itself is already a huge victory.
Chapter 11. How to keep going when progress feels slow. Why plateaus and setbacks are part of mastery, not signs of failure. There comes a moment in every learner's journey when motivation fades and frustration quietly takes its place. At first, everything felt new and exciting. You could almost feel your brain lighting up every time you learned a new word or understood a sentence in English. You remember that first time you watched a video without subtitles or ordered a coffee using only English, and you felt proud. You were growing. You were moving forward. You were becoming someone who could speak another language. But now, something's shifted. You're still studying, still practicing, but something feels off. You're not seeing the same progress anymore. You still make the same grammar mistakes. You still forget words mid-sentence. You still freeze when someone speaks too fast. And no matter how much time you put in, it feels like you're stuck in place, walking but not moving forward. This is what we call the plateau. And it's not just common, it's inevitable. Every learner, whether beginner or advanced, hits this wall. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. In fact, it usually means you're doing something very, very right. You see, in the early stages of learning, progress is loud. You go from zero to something. Every new phrase, every sentence, every conversation feels like a huge win. But as you grow, progress becomes quieter, more subtle. It happens underneath the surface. You stop noticing it because your expectations have changed. Now you want more. Now you want to be fluent. Now you compare yourself to native speakers. And that's when doubt creeps in. You think, why am I not better by now? Or maybe I'm not talented enough. But that's not true. The plateau isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of consolidation. Your brain is sorting, organizing, and strengthening everything you've learned so far. It's getting ready for the next leap. But, like a tree growing roots, that part of the process happens underground, invisible, but absolutely essential. Still, we live in a world that celebrates fast results. We're told that success should come quickly, that if we're not improving constantly, we're falling behind. But learning a language isn't a race. It's not a straight line. It's a long, winding path with ups, downs, pauses, and breakthroughs. Sometimes you'll feel like you're flying, other times like you're crawling. Both are part of the journey. And if you can learn to accept the quiet, slow phases, the moments where nothing seems to change, you'll find a deeper kind of strength. The strength to keep going, even when it's not easy, even when it's not fun, even when it feels like nothing's working. One of the most powerful things you can do during a plateau is redefine what progress means. Maybe you didn't learn 10 new words today, but did you understand the main idea of a podcast episode? That's progress. Maybe you struggled to speak during a conversation, but did you realize why you struggled? That's awareness. Maybe you forgot a word, but you remembered it 5 minutes later. That's memory at work. These are small signs, quiet signs, but they matter. Celebrate them. Let them count.
You can also shift your focus from outcome to process. Instead of thinking, I need to be fluent, think, I need to show up today. Open the app, watch the video, speak out loud. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to feel amazing. What matters is that you're still in motion, still putting in the time, still showing your brain that this language matters to you. Because consistency, not speed, is what builds fluency. And then there are the emotional setbacks. The days when you feel embarrassed after a conversation. The days when someone laughs or corrects you. The days when you freeze mid-sentence and want to give up. These moments can feel like proof that you're not good enough, but they're not. They're simply signs that you're in the arena, trying, risking, and growing. Don't let a bad moment become a permanent belief. You are allowed to struggle. You're allowed to feel stuck. That doesn't erase your progress. That doesn't cancel your effort. All it means is that you're human, and you're learning something incredibly difficult. Think of any skill you've ever mastered: driving, cooking, riding a bike. There were moments when you felt clumsy, uncertain, even scared, but you kept practicing. You kept showing up, and eventually the pieces came together. Language is the same. It's not about genius or luck or having a language brain. It's about stubbornness, patience, repetition. It's about deciding over and over again to keep going, even when your results don't shout, even when no one sees your effort, even when it's just you, alone, studying a list of words for the 5th time. That's what builds fluency. That's what turns learners into speakers. So when it feels like you're not improving, keep going. When it feels like you've hit a wall, keep going. When it feels like you'll never get there, keep going. Not because it's easy, but because you've already come too far to stop now. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are exactly where you need to be. The quiet season is still part of the journey. The roots are still growing. The breakthrough is still coming. Trust the process. Trust your effort. And most of all, trust yourself.
Chapter 12. Your mistakes make you human, and that's beautiful. Let's take a moment and breathe. After everything we've explored so far in this journey, I want to end with something deeply human, something often forgotten in the rush of productivity, perfectionism, and the race to be fluent, flawless, or good enough. I want to remind you of something that doesn't require any grammar, any vocabulary or perfect pronunciation, just your presence, your courage, your willingness to try. And here it is. Your mistakes make you human, and that's beautiful. Think about it. What does it really mean to be human? It means we stumble, we fall, we misunderstand things, we forget, we laugh at the wrong moment, we say the wrong word, we freeze, we blush, we get nervous, we second-guess ourselves, and yet we still show up. We still try again. We still speak. And that is beautiful. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real, authentic, alive. In a world full of filters and edited videos and polished presentations, making a mistake is one of the few things left that shows your true self. When you say something wrong in English and someone gently corrects you, that moment isn't a failure, it's connection. It's vulnerability meeting kindness. It's real learning. Mistakes are not signs that you're broken or incapable. They are signs that you're growing, stretching, reaching, becoming. Sometimes we treat language like a performance, like a stage where we have to memorize all our lines before the curtain rises. But real language, real communication, is more like jazz. It's messy. It's improvisation. It's human beings trying their best to be understood. And in that messy, imperfect, unpredictable space, that's where life happens. That's where the learning lives. And the beautiful thing is that the people who matter, the people who really care, they don't expect perfection from you. They're not judging your grammar. They're not listening to your accent and measuring your worth. They're listening for your heart, your story, your effort. And that effort, that's something no mistake can erase. You see, your journey with English isn't just about mastering a language. It's about becoming someone who is brave enough to be seen, brave enough to be heard, brave enough to make mistakes and keep going anyway. It's about shedding the shame, the fear, the pressure, and stepping into your growth with gentleness and grace. I know how it feels to freeze mid-sentence. I know how it feels to forget a word you practiced 100 times. I know how it feels to think, maybe I'll never get this right. But let me tell you something. Getting it right is not the point. Getting better is. And getting better always involves getting it wrong along the way. So, the next time you catch yourself making a mistake, stop. Take a deep breath. Smile, even if it feels strange. And say to yourself, this is part of the process. This is part of me becoming who I want to be. Because it is. Every wrong word is a step closer to fluency. Every awkward silence is an invitation to courage. Every correction is a gift in disguise. Remember, perfection isn't the goal. Presence is, growth is, connection is. And those things, they only happen when you're willing to be imperfect, when you're willing to be human.
Let's take a moment to remember how far we've come together in this podcast. We began in Chapter 1 by exploring why we fear mistakes, the emotional baggage we carry from childhood, from school, from society. In Chapter 2, we redefined what a mistake really is and challenged the old beliefs that have held us back. Chapter 3 reminded us that mistakes are proof of effort, signs that we're alive, moving, learning. In Chapter 4, we pulled back the curtain on native speakers and saw that they make mistakes too, all the time. In Chapter 5, we tackled perfectionism and invited progress to take its place. Then, in Chapter 6, we dove into the science, neuroscience to be exact, and saw that the brain learns best through errors. Chapter 7 gave us permission to speak without shame, to be bold even when uncertain. Chapter 8 brought in humor, the medicine that makes mistakes lighter. Chapter 9 taught us how to dig out lessons from every misstep. Chapter 10 helped us deal with those hard moments when we feel stuck or embarrassed. Chapter 11 gave us perspective, reminding us that slow progress is still progress. And here we are now in Chapter 12, wrapping it all up with compassion, with truth, with the beautiful, messy, glorious reality that mistakes are part of what makes us human. If you've listened this far, let me just say, I'm proud of you. Seriously. You didn't give up. You chose to invest in yourself. You chose to grow. And that says everything. Wherever you are in your English journey, keep going, keep practicing, keep messing up, keep getting better. Your future self is cheering for you, and so am I. Now, if this podcast resonated with you, if even one part of this message lit something inside you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs it, a friend, a classmate, a fellow learner. Let's spread this message together. Mistakes are beautiful, and so are you. And hey, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. There's more coming, more stories, more support, more truth. Thank you for being here. Thank you for learning with me. Thank you for showing up. Until next time, keep learning, keep trying, keep being human.